The key slid into the lock and turned. The door swung open. The familiar smell of home washed over me. I dropped my suitcase and called out, "Daisy, Dad's home." No answer. The living room curtains were drawn, casting the room in shadow. My hand paused as I was taking off my shoes. It was too quiet. My wife was at work today, but Daisy should have been home. I called her right before I left the hotel, and she said she was watching TV. I walked toward the living room, a knot of unease tightening in my stomach. And then I saw her. My daughter, my Daisy, was curled up in the space between the sofa and the wall. A tiny, huddled shadow. She wasn't looking at me. Her face was buried in her knees. The most jarring thing was her head. It was bald. Her pale scalp gleamed in the dim light. Her long, soft black hair was gone. Every last strand. My mind went blank with a roar like static. The car keys slipped from my hand and clattered on the hardwood floor. "Daisy." I walked closer, my voice sounding distant and strange. Her shoulders hitched. A sob she could no longer suppress escaped from the shelter of her arms. I knelt, reaching out to touch her, but stopped my hand mid-air. I was afraid of scaring her. "Daisy, look at Daddy." She slowly lifted her head. Her small face was streaked with tears, her eyes red and swollen, her lips trembling. She couldn't meet my eyes, her gaze fixed on my chest. "Dad, Daddy." She choked on a sob. "Your head. Who did this?" My voice was shaking, each word forced through gritted teeth. Blood rushed to my head, and the only sound in my ears was the frantic pounding of my own heart. Ms. Albright." Daisy's sobs grew louder. She said, my hair was too long, that it was a distraction. She said, if I didn't cut it, I couldn't come to class. Ms. Albright. An image of a woman in her late 30s formed in my mind. Daisy's homeroom teacher. I'd met her at a parent-teacher conference. Polished makeup, a measured, condescending way of speaking. My hands clenched into fists, my nails digging into my palms. What did she use to cut it? Clippers, like the kind at a barber shop. Daisy cried. It was in her office. A bunch of other teachers were watching. Her office. Clippers. Other teachers watching. The scene exploded in my mind. My daughter, an 8-year-old girl, being held down in a chair, the electric clippers buzzing against her scalp, her hair falling away in clumps, surrounded by the very adults she was supposed to trust. I pulled her into my arms. Her small body trembled against mine like a leaf in a storm. I felt her tears soaking through my shirt, both cold and scalding hot. My hand was shaking, too, not from fear, but from rage. The kind of rage that burns your bones to ash. It's okay, Daisy. It's okay, I whispered, patting her back. Dad's home now. Dad will fix this. She cried in my arms for a long time, until she finally fell asleep from exhaustion. I carried her to her small bedroom and tucked her in. Even in sleep, her brow was furrowed, a tear still clinging to the corner of her eye. I walked out of her room, closing the door softly behind me. The living room was a mess. My suitcase was still lying by the door. I didn't care. I went into the bathroom and opened the vanity cabinet. On the bottom shelf was a box. It was a grooming kit I'd bought for myself before I got married. Inside was a pair of black electric clippers. I took them out and flipped the switch. Bzzzzzzz. The clippers roared to life, the sound unnervingly loud in the quiet apartment. I looked at myself in the mirror. My eyes were bloodshot. My face was a twisted, unfamiliar mask of fury. I turned the clippers off. Ms. Albright. I took out my phone and opened the class parents group chat. I found her profile picture. It was a professionally taken photo of her, smiling warmly, her hair styled in perfect, glossy waves. I smiled. The light from the phone screen glinted off the cold steel of the clippers in my hand. I didn't sleep. Daisy's sleep was fitful. She would whimper, crying out, "Don't." I sat by her bed, wiping the cold sweat from her forehead and stroking her bald head over and over. The feel of it was like sandpaper against my heart. Sometime after midnight, she finally fell into a deep sleep. I went back to the living room and sat in the dark. After the initial tidal wave of rage receded, it left behind something cold and hard. I started to think. I opened my phone and found Ms. Albright's Facebook page. I scrolled through her posts, one by one. The most recent one was from yesterday afternoon. It was a selfie taken at a high-end salon. Her signature wavy hair was freshly styled, shining under the lights. The caption read, A woman has to treat herself right. Quarterly deep conditioning, check. A long list of parents had liked the post, leaving fawning comments below. You look beautiful, Ms. Albright. So classy. You work so hard. You deserve it. Such a great role model for our kids. I stared at the picture. She meticulously cared for her own hair, yet she had destroyed my daughters with such brutality. My daughter, who was only 8. My knuckles turned white. I kept scrolling. I saw the articles she shared about education, with titles like The Importance of Rules for a Child's Development. Without structure, there is chaos and tough love. Why a strict teacher is a good teacher. It was all bullshit. I turned off the phone. A plan had already formed in my mind. It was simple, direct, and fair. I didn't want an apology. Apologies are the cheapest currency in the world. I wanted her to understand. I went to the hall closet and rummaged through my toolbox. I found it. A small, sharp straight razor. I also found a sharpening stone. For the rest of the night, I sat in the living room, slowly, methodically honing the thin blade against the stone. Scrape, scrape, scrape. The sound was grating in the silent apartment. I worked slowly, patiently, like a craftsman preparing for a sacred ritual. Daisy's words replayed in my head. In her office, a bunch of other teachers were watching. They watched. They did nothing. Fine. Then everyone was going to watch this, too. As dawn approached, I made sure the electric clippers were fully charged and wrapped both them and the razor in a cloth. I placed them in my briefcase. My briefcase also held the gift I'd bought for Daisy on my trip, a beautiful music box I hadn't had the chance to give her. Now it lay beside the cold steel tools. My wife called, asking if I'd made it home. I'm home, I said. She heard the edge of my voice. What's wrong? You sound strange. Is Daisy okay? Daisy's fine. You just focus on work, I said. There's just something at home I need to take care of. I didn't tell her. I was afraid she would try to stop me. This was something I had to do myself. After hanging up, I went to the kitchen and heated up a can of soup. I ate quickly, needing the energy. Today was going to be a long day. 7:30 a.m. I woke Daisy. When she opened her eyes and saw me, her expression brightened for a second before quickly dimming. She subconsciously reached up to touch her head. Daddy, get up, get dressed, eat your breakfast. You have to go to school today. My voice was calm. Fear instantly flooded Daisy's eyes. I don't want to go. She buried her head under the covers. They'll laugh at me. I pulled her out from under the blanket and sat her up on the bed, making her look me in the eye. Daisy, listen to me. You did nothing wrong. Someone else was wrong. We don't punish ourselves for other people's mistakes, understand? She nodded, not quite understanding, tears welling up again. I held her face in my hands and said, word by word, today Daddy is going with you. And I promise, after today, no one will ever dare to laugh at you again. Daddy is going to get justice for you. My expression must have been terrifying, but Daisy saw something else in it. She stared at me for a moment, then nodded firmly. She was silent during breakfast. I peeled a hard-boiled egg and placed it in her bowl. Eat it. We need our strength. She ate it in small, quiet bites. On the way to school, I drove while Daisy sat in the passenger seat, staring silently out the window. I reached over and took her small hand, which was resting on her lap. It was ice cold. Are you scared? I asked. She shook her head, then nodded. It's okay to be scared. But remember, Daddy is here, I said. No matter what happens in a little while, you just stand by my side and watch. I pulled up to the school. It was peak drop-off time. Kids in their school uniforms chattered as they walked through the gates. Daisy instinctively reached for the hood of her sweatshirt. I put my hand on hers. Don't. You walk in with your head held high. She hesitated, but she listened to me. I parked the car, slung my briefcase over my shoulder, and took her hand as we walked toward the school entrance. The security guard at the gate knew me and waved with a smile. Hey, Daisy's dad. Back from your trip. I nodded, but I didn't smile back. The moment we stepped onto school grounds, I could feel dozens of eyes on us. From students, from other parents. The stares were like needles, pricking at Daisy. Her body tensed, and her pace slowed. I squeezed her hand and whispered in her ear, don't look down. If they stare at you, you stare right back. I led her through the crowd. I could hear the whispers. Look, that girl. Her head is shaved. What happened to her? I stared straight ahead, walking directly toward the main building. My objective was clear. It was 8 a.m., the start of homeroom. Ms. Albright should be in her office. But as I reached the large blacktop in front of the building, I changed my mind. On the field, several classes were lining up, apparently for some kind of event. A small podium was set up under the tall flagpole, and a familiar figure was standing at that podium, holding a microphone. It was Ms. Albright. She was wearing a smart-looking pantsuit, her makeup perfect, her beautiful wavy hair catching the morning light. She was directing students into lines, her voice clear and her posture elegant. I stopped. This was the place. An office was too private. Here, the entire school was present. Much better. Daisy, wait for me here. I let go of her hand and pointed to a large oak tree at the edge of the field. She looked at me, her eyes wide with anxiety. Just do as I say. Stand right here and watch. I patted her head, then turned and started walking toward the podium in the center of the blacktop. My pace wasn't fast, but every step was heavy and deliberate. I gripped the strap of my briefcase so tightly my knuckles turned white. The noise of the schoolyard seemed to fade away. In my world, there was only the figure on that podium. Someone noticed me, a man walking with purpose straight across the field, his face a blank mask. Students watched me with curiosity. A couple of gym teachers frowned in my direction. The principal was the first to react. He was a man in his 50s with a balding head. He hurried toward me, a professional smile plastered on his face. "Excuse me, sir. We're about to begin our Monday morning assembly. Can I help you with something?" I didn't look at him. My eyes remained fixed on Ms. Albright. "I'm here to see Ms. Albright," I said. The principal's smile faltered. "Oh, Ms. Albright. Well, as you can see, she's a bit busy right now. Perhaps you could wait in the main office after the assembly is over." I kept walking as if I hadn't heard him. He became flustered and stepped in front of me, holding out an arm to block my path. "Hey, sir. Sir, let's just talk about this. You can't just walk out here. You'll disrupt the students." I stopped and finally turned my gaze on him. I pushed him aside. I didn't use much force, but he stumbled back a few steps, surprised. He probably never imagined a seemingly ordinary parent would get physical. "Get out of my way," I bit out. My voice wasn't loud, but the principal froze. He looked in my eyes and must have seen something he couldn't comprehend or stop. He didn't try to block me again. I continued toward the podium. By now, everyone had noticed the intruder. The noise on the blacktop died down. Hundreds of pairs of eyes were focused on me. Ms. Albright, on the podium, saw me too. She frowned, her face showing clear annoyance. She obviously recognized me. "Mr. Martinez? What is it? This is a school assembly. Please leave the field immediately." She brought the microphone to her lips, her tone carrying the condescending authority she might use on a misbehaving student. I didn't stop. One step, then another, up the short flight of stairs to the podium. Her annoyance turned to alarm and a flicker of panic. "What are you doing?" "Security." "Where is security?" Two men who looked like gym teachers started jogging toward me, but I had already reached her. We were less than 2 feet apart. I could smell her expensive perfume, see the perfectly drawn eyeliner. I swung my briefcase off my shoulder and placed it on the lectern. Click! The sound of the metal latches opening was amplified by the microphone she hadn't had time to lower, echoing across the entire schoolyard. The world went silent. Ms. Albright stared at my open briefcase, her expression shifting from alarm to confusion, then back to her default commanding arrogance. "What do you think you're doing? This is a school. This is not a place for you to cause a scene." Her voice, crackling with static from a microphone, boomed across the blacktop. I ignored her. My hand reached into the briefcase. The first thing I took out was the music box. It was pink with a small ballerina on top. I placed it gently on the lectern. Then my hand went in again. This time, it came out with the black electric clippers. I flipped the switch. Beezy, the deep, powerful hum of the motor shattered the morning calm. The sound, magnified tenfold by the microphone, was like a swarm of angry hornets flying straight into the ears of everyone present. The schoolyard was dead silent. Hundreds of children and dozens of teachers stood frozen. The color drained from Ms. Albright's face. She stared at the clippers in my hand, her mouth slightly agape, her composure and elegance shattering into naked fear. "You're insane," she shrieked, her voice turning shrill and piercing. The two gym teachers, still about 20 feet away, were so stunned by the sight they momentarily forgot to move forward. I took one step closer to Ms. Albright. She screamed and stumbled backward, bumping into the flagpole behind her. "Stay away from me. Don't you come near me." I held the buzzing clippers up to the microphone. "Ms. Albright, didn't you say that long hair is a distraction from learning?" My voice was calm, carrying clearly over the sound system. "Aren't you the one who is all about rules and proper education?" I took another step. She was trapped, her back pressed against the flagpole. "My daughter is 8 years old. My wife grew her hair out, strand by strand. She told me she wanted to be a princess with long hair." My gaze swept over the students below. I saw Daisy on the edge of the crowd. Her face was pale, but she was standing tall, watching me. I looked back at Ms. Albright's terrified face. "Do you think, maybe, your hair is a distraction from your ability to teach?" I didn't wait for an answer. I lunged forward. My left arm shot out, grabbing a handful of her blouse and yanking her off balance. As she fell toward me, I wrapped my arm around her neck, locking her in a firm hold. She struggled wildly, screaming, clawing at my arm with her nails. The two gym teachers finally snapped out of it and charged up the steps, shouting, "Let her go." I turned my body, shielding her from them with my back, and pressed the still buzzing clippers against her meticulously styled hair. "Stay back." I roar, my voice raw. "Anyone comes closer, and I can't guarantee this blade won't slip and cut her scalp open." The two men skidded to a halt, their faces white with fear, not daring to take another step. The entire schoolyard was plunged into a strange, tense silence. The only sound were Ms. Albright's desperate, choked sobs and the relentless hum of the clippers. I leaned in close to her ear and whispered, in a voice only she could hear, "Now, I'm going to help you focus." The moment the clippers made contact with her hair, I felt a violent tremor go through Ms. Albright's body. Then came the quiet, satisfying sound of cutting. A lock of highlighted brown hair fell from the clippers, drifted through the air, and landed on the red carpet of the podium. "Ah!" Ms. Albright let out an inhuman shriek. She fought like a wild animal, kicking her legs, trying to pry my arm from her neck. She was strong, but I was stronger. Years of working construction sites had taught me how to handle a struggle. I used my knee to pin her lower back, steadying her, while my right hand moved the clippers firmly and smoothly from her hairline backward. Another clump of hair fell, then a third and a fourth. The path of the clippers left a pale, ugly trail through her perfect waves, like a field that had been crudely plowed. My hair, she sobbed, her voice filled with despair. "You're a monster, a devil." "That's right," I whispered in her ear. "I'm the devil, and you're the one who summoned me." My movements never faltered. I worked with the focus of a craftsman carving a sculpture. I had to make this sculpture perfect, an exact replica of the one on my daughter's head. The students below were in complete shock. In their small worlds, they had never witnessed something so raw, so direct. Their teacher, a figure of absolute authority, was now being restrained and humiliated like a helpless animal. Some of the younger kids started to cry. Others covered their eyes. But most of them just stared, wide-eyed, not blinking. I even saw a flicker of something like excitement on the faces of some of the older students. Perhaps they, too, had been victims of Ms. Albright's rules. Down below, the principal was scrambling in circles, fumbling with his phone, his fingers trembling as he dialed. "Call 911. Somebody call 911. A few male teachers started to rush the podium, but they stopped at the steps, hesitating when they saw the cold fury in my eyes. They were afraid I would actually hurt her. "You're going to jail. They'll lock you up," Ms. Albright wailed, playing what she must have thought was her strongest card. "I know," I replied, "but not before your head is as shiny as my daughter's." I worked faster. The clippers were efficient. Large swaths of hair fell away, quickly forming a pile at her feet. Her expensive quarterly conditioning was now just trash on the floor. She started begging. "I am sorry. I was wrong. I'm so sorry. Please, just let me go." "Too late," I said. "My daughter begged you to, when you had the clippers to her head. Did you let her go?" My words silenced her. Her body went rigid. I kept working. Soon, most of the hair on her head was gone, leaving only a patchy, uneven stubble. I turned off the electric clippers. She seemed to sigh in relief, thinking it was over. But then I reached into my pocket and pulled out the straight razor I had sharpened all night. "The clippers don't get it clean enough," I said into the microphone, my voice steady. "Leave stubble." My daughter's head didn't have a single hair left. I twisted her head back, forcing her to look up at the sky. The morning sun illuminated her face, a mess of tears and mucus. Her eyes were filled with a pure, absolute terror. A terror 10 times stronger than what the clippers had caused. I wasn't going to use it, not really, but she didn't know that. I held the cold, gleaming razor up, letting it catch the light. Then, I gently, deliberately laid the flat, blunt side of the blade against her scalp. I held the cold steel against her skin for a long moment. Ms. Albright's body convulsed, not with struggle, but with spasms born from the deepest, most primal fear. She stopped screaming. A hoarse, gasping sound, like air being forced through a broken bellows, was all she could manage. I could feel her pulse hammering frantically against my arm. I was patient. I let the moment stretch, letting the image burn into everyone's memory. Down below, the blacktop was silent. If the first part was an act of violence, this was an act of cold, calculated cruelty. It was quieter, but it struck a deeper chord of fear. I saw the principal finish his 911 call, now shouting incoherently at the dispatcher. I saw the gym teachers, their faces pale, frozen in place. And I saw the children. Their expressions were a complex mix of fear, fascination, and something else they couldn't possibly understand. A secret, satisfying catharsis. Because Ms. Albright's rules had never just been about hair. They were about being forced to stand in the corner, about being publicly shamed, about having their favorite toys confiscated. Today, the rule maker was being punished by a rule that was older and more savage than any of hers. The sun climbed higher, reflecting off the top of Ms. Albright's now bare head, creating a glare. It looked exactly the same as Daisy's had when I first saw her in the doorway. I finally stopped. I released her. She collapsed onto the podium like a puppet with its strings cut. She covered her head with her hands, curled into a ball, and let out low, desperate sobs. Her proud, wavy hair was now a scattered pile of brown tufts, blowing across the podium in the morning breeze. I tossed the razor onto the ground. Then, I picked up the microphone. I stood up straight and surveyed the entire schoolyard. Hundreds of pairs of eyes were focused on me like spotlights. I cleared my throat. "My name is Leo Martinez. I'm the father of Daisy Martinez from the 2nd grade. My voice carried clearly to every corner of the yard. I was away on business for 20 days. Every single day, I FaceTimed my daughter. I asked her how she was. She said she was fine. I asked if anything was wrong. She said no. She's a good kid. She didn't want me to worry. Last night, I came home, and I found my daughter, my 8-year-old daughter, with her head shaved bald. She was hiding in a corner, too ashamed to even look at me. My voice started to tremble, but I fought to control it. I pulled my phone from my pocket and brought up the picture I'd taken of Daisy last night. The photo of her asleep, brow furrowed, her head bare. I held the screen up for the teachers and students to see. It was this woman, your respected Ms. Albright, who personally shaved her head in her office, in front of other teachers, because her hair was a distraction. She is 8 years old. I turned and nudged the weeping figure on the floor with the toe of my shoe. "Ms. Albright, get up. Let everyone get a good look at you. Does your new haircut distract you from your ability to teach?" She didn't move, only cried harder. I took a deep breath and faced the crowd again. I'm not a highly educated man. I don't know about fancy theories. I only believe in one simple truth, an eye for an eye. You touch my daughter, and I will make you pay tenfold. I'm saying this here and now. From this day forward, in this school, if anyone, teacher, principal, I don't care who, dares to lay a finger on my daughter again for any reason, I promise you this. Next time, I won't be bringing clippers. With that, I dropped the microphone. In the distance, the wail of sirens grew louder and closer. I turned and walked down the steps of the podium. The crowd parted before me like the Red Sea. I walked straight to the big oak tree. Daisy was standing there, tears streaming down her small face. But her eyes were shining with a fierce, bright light. I walked up to her, knelt, and opened my arms. She launched herself into my embrace, wrapping her arms around my neck, and burst into tears. But this time, there was no fear in her cries. The squad cars screeched to a halt at the school entrance. Several officers rushed in. I just held Daisy, not moving. The crowd on the blacktop was in chaos. Teachers were trying to calm frightened students and herd them back to their classrooms. The principal scrambled over to the police, pointing at me. "Officer, it was him. He's the one. He assaulted a teacher on school property." Two officers walked briskly toward me, their expressions grim. "Sir, I'm going to need you to let the child go and come with us," one of them, an older cop, said. I gently released Daisy, setting her on her feet and wiping the tears from her cheeks. "Don't be scared. Daddy will be back soon," I said, looking her in the eyes. Daisy clung to my jacket, shaking her head. She didn't speak, but her eyes were full of trust and a desperate plea for me not to leave. "Go find Mom. You listen to Mom now." I stroked her bald head one more time. This time, it didn't feel like a source of pain, but of a strange, fierce love. I stood up, faced the officers, and held out my hands. "I'll go with you." They cuffed me. The cold metal snapped around my wrists. I glanced back one last time. Ms. Albright was being helped to her feet by a few female teachers, a jacket draped around her shoulders. She was still crying hysterically. The principal's bald spot gleamed in the sun as he animatedly described my violent rampage to another officer. And my daughter, Daisy, stood under that oak tree. She wasn't crying anymore. She just stood there, watching them lead me away. Her gaze was like a nail pinning me, holding me steady. They put me in the back of the patrol car. As the door closed, I saw my wife arrive, running through the crowd to embrace Daisy. The car started moving. Inside, a younger cop kept looking at me, like he wanted to say something but couldn't. The older one spoke. "Did you have to do that? Make such a scene? There are legal ways to handle things." I leaned my head against the backrest and watched the streetscape blur past the window. "The law." I let out a short, bitter laugh. Can the law make my daughter's hair grow back overnight? Can the law erase the memory of her humiliation? The law is about due process, about evidence. What I wanted was justice. Today, the older cop fell silent. He'd probably seen his share of cases where the law fell short. At the station, I was taken to an interrogation room. They went through the motions. Photos, fingerprints, taking my statement. I told them everything, exactly as it happened. From the moment I came home to everything I did to school. I didn't hide a thing, and I didn't make any excuses. "Do you understand that what you did constitutes assault?" the detective asked. "Yes. And you know you'll face legal consequences for that." "Yes." "Do you regret it?" I looked up and met his gaze. "I only regret one thing," I said. "I regret being on the road for 20 days. If I had been home, my daughter never would have suffered like that." The interrogation stalled. My wife arrived with a lawyer, a sharp-looking man in his 40s named Mr. Davis. He met with me in a private room. "Mr. Martinez, the situation isn't great," he said, getting straight to the point. "The victim is a teacher. The assault took place on school grounds, in front of hundreds of children. The social impact is terrible. The school and Ms. Albright are both pressing for the most severe charges." I nodded. I expected that. "However," Mr. Davis continued, his tone shifting, "there might be a way through this. Your wife has been busy. She's been in contact with some other parents." I looked at him, confused. "What do you mean?" She said that after the incident, the class parents group chat exploded. A lot of parents started speaking up, saying their kids have also been punished or publicly humiliated by Ms. Albright in various ways. They were just too scared to say anything before. A light gleamed in Mr. Davis's eyes. "What you did, it was like lighting a fuse. Now, public opinion might not be so one-sided." For the first time since this all began, I felt something stir inside me. I wasn't fighting alone. For the next 48 hours, I was held at the county jail. It was a world unto itself. I had no idea what was happening outside, but I could sense a shift from the changing attitudes of the officers. At first, they looked at me like I was a violent, impulsive criminal. Later, their looks became more complex. There was sympathy, weariness, and maybe even a hint of respect. Mr. Davis visited twice more. The second time, he brought a tablet. "Leo, you need to see this." He pulled up a local news website. The top story was about me. The headline was sensational. "An eye for an eye dad. Father's revenge on teacher who shaved daughter's head ignites national debate." The article had everything. A blurry photo of me on the podium with the Clippers, a screenshot of Ms. Albright crying, and a heartbreaking photo of my daughter's bald head. The comments section had tens of thousands of entries. So satisfying. This is exactly how you deal with a bully teacher. I don't support violence, but I am 100% on this dad's side. Some people have no business being educators. My son's teacher shamed him in front of the class once, and he cried all night. I wish I'd had this man's courage. Of course, there were dissenting voices. This is vigilantism. He took the law into his own hands and should be prosecuted to the fullest extent. What kind of example does this set for children? That violence is the answer? Unacceptable. But the voices supporting me were overwhelmingly in the majority. The most critical part, however, was in the second half of the article. Dozens of parents whose children had been in Ms. Albright's class came forward to the media. They provided a mountain of evidence. Stories of kids being forced to stand outside in the hot sun for a whole recess. Of homework assignments being ripped up in front of them for not being neat enough. Of children being verbally abused with cruel, cutting remarks, leading one to develop anxiety. One parent even reported that Ms. Albright had dragged their son out of the classroom by his ear for a low test score. One story after another, each more shocking than the last. Ms. Albright's carefully crafted persona as a dedicated, caring educator was being torn to shreds. The pressure is now on the school district, Mr. Davis explained. They thought this was a simple assault case. They never expected it to expose a systemic problem with an abusive teacher they'd been ignoring for years. Ms. Albright has been suspended pending a full investigation. I stared at the screen, speechless for a long time. My Daisy wasn't the first victim. She was just the one who suffered the most visible wound. If I hadn't done what I did, would all of this have stayed buried forever? Would those other kids have had to keep enduring her rules in silence? Leo, Mr. Davis said, looking me in the eye, you did something a lot of people only dream of doing. Legally speaking, you were in the wrong. But in another, more important sense, you may have been completely in the right. I closed my eyes. I saw Daisy's shining, adoring eyes again. In that moment, a profound sense of peace washed over me. I did the right thing. The story escalated faster than anyone could have predicted. As more parents came forward with evidence and testimony, the narrative began to shift. This was no longer about a single father's act of revenge. It had become a public referendum on teacher abuse and negligent school administration. The State Board of Education launched a formal inquiry into the school. The principal was placed on administrative leave for his failure to supervise and address repeated complaints of teacher misconduct. The school's official Facebook page was flooded with hundreds of thousands of angry comments from people across the country, demanding accountability for all the children who had been harmed. Under this immense public pressure, the stance of Ms. Albright and the school district did a complete 180. The administration, which had initially insisted on pressing for maximum charges, sent a representative to Mr. Davis to express their desire for a resolution. Ms. Albright herself, through her family, sent word that she was willing to make a public apology to me and my daughter and offer financial compensation. I sat in the meeting room, listening as Mr. Davis relayed this information, and could only laugh at the irony. They're scared, I said. Terrified. Their priority now is damage control, not punishing you, Mr. Davis confirmed. This is very good for us. If we can get a formal statement of forgiveness from her, it will give you enormous leverage in court. I don't want her money, I said. I'll accept an apology, but it has to be in front of my daughter. Mr. Davis nodded. I understand. I'll arrange it. A few days later, in a conference room at the courthouse, I saw Ms. Albright again. She was dressed in plain clothes, wearing no makeup and a beanie to cover her head. She looked exhausted and haunted, all the arrogant authority from the assembly completely gone. My wife came with Daisy. When she saw Ms. Albright, Daisy instinctively hid behind my wife. Ms. Albright stood there, wringing her hands, her lips moving for a long time before any sound came out. Mr. Martinez, Mrs. Martinez, I'm sorry. Her voice was hoarse and thick with tears. Then she looked at Daisy. Daisy, I am so sorry. I should never have done that to you. I was wrong. She broke down, sobbing. I didn't know how much of her remorse was genuine and how much was due to the pressure. But at that moment, it didn't matter. What mattered was that Daisy was seeing it. She was seeing this figure of terror, the person who held so much power over her, reduced to a broken, weeping mess, begging for her forgiveness. I knelt and put my hands on Daisy's shoulders. Daisy, do you accept her apology? Daisy peeked out from behind her mom. She looked at Ms. Albright, then at me. After a long silence, she gave a small, tentative nod. A wave of relief washed over Ms. Albright, and she nearly collapsed. I stood up and looked at Mr. Davis. Okay, have her sign whatever you need her to sign. I didn't have to forgive her. I just needed the knot of fear in my daughter's heart to finally come undone. In the end, I didn't go to prison. The judge took all the circumstances into account. The extreme provocation, the defendant's clear history of misconduct, the fact that I had obtained a formal letter of forgiveness from the victim, the lack of serious physical injury, and the massive public outcry. The final verdict was guilty of misdemeanor assault, but with significant mitigating factors. I was sentenced to 6 months of probation and a fine. Probation meant I didn't have to serve time. I just had to check in with a probation officer periodically. For me, it was the best possible outcome. The day I walked out of the courthouse, the sun was shining. My wife and Daisy were waiting for me. Daisy's hair had grown into a soft, fuzzy buzz cut. When she saw me, she broke into a huge grin and ran into my arms. Daddy, I swung her up and kissed her cheek. It was all over. Ms. Albright was fired. Word was she moved out of state. I never heard another thing about her. The principal was demoted and transferred to an administrative desk job downtown. The school went through a major overhaul. The new principal was a serious, dedicated woman who personally visited our home to apologize and assure us that the culture would change. Many of the parents who had supported us became our friends. My wife started a new group chat where everyone shared parenting tips and school news in a positive, supportive atmosphere. Life seemed to return to normal, but something had fundamentally changed. With a criminal record, I lost my old job. But it didn't matter. I took the settlement money from the school district, added it to my savings, and opened a small hardware store in our neighborhood. It wasn't much, but it was enough to support my family. More importantly, I was home every day to walk Daisy to and from school, to help her with her homework, to listen to her stories. I never had to travel for work again. We moved Daisy to a new school. She thrived there, making lots of new friends. She was no longer the timid, quiet little girl. She became outgoing and confident, even joining the school choir. Her hair grew longer and longer, from a buzz cut to a bob to a length where she could finally wear a small ponytail. Sometimes when I'd watch her running on the playground, her hair flying behind her, I would think back to that morning, to the man who walked into a school carrying a set of clippers. I'd ask myself if I could go back in time, would I do it again? The answer was always yes. I have no regrets. It was the most right thing I have ever done. It might not have been legal or rational, but it won back a father's dignity and a daughter's peace of mind. It cleared the shadows from her childhood. A year later, on a summer afternoon, my hardware store was doing well. The people in the neighborhood looked out for me. They all knew my story, and they always looked at me with a certain respect. Business was slow that afternoon. I was sitting in a chair by the entrance, looking across the street. Daisy was walking home from school. She was wearing a pretty sundress, her backpack on, holding hands and laughing with a few of her friends. Her hair had grown to her shoulders, and she wore it in 2 cute pigtails that bounced with every step. The sunlight caught in her hair, making it shine like gold. She saw me, and her eyes lit up. She said goodbye to her friends, and then came running across the street toward me. Daddy. Her voice was as clear as a bell. I opened my arms and caught my little cannonball. Did you have a good day at school? I asked. The best. She planted a big, loud kiss on my cheek. In art class, the teacher said my drawing was the best in the whole class. Oh yeah? What did you draw? Our family, she said, proudly pulling a piece of paper from her backpack. On the paper, there were 3 figures. There was Mom, with long hair and a dress. There was Daisy herself, with 2 pigtails and a huge smile. And then there was Dad. In the drawing, I wasn't holding a wrench or a screwdriver. I was holding a set of clippers, and they were glowing with a golden light, like a superhero's sword. I stared at the drawing, a lump forming in my throat. Daisy, you. Daddy is my hero who protects me, she said, pointing at the clippers with a look of pure pride. It's like his super weapon. My nose stung, and my eyes instantly welled up. I had thought the incident would be a scar on her memory. I assumed she would want to forget it, but she hadn't. In her pure, innocent world, she had transformed that cold, violent tool into a symbol of the warmest protection. It wasn't a scar. It was a medal. I hugged my daughter tightly. She smelled like sunshine and freshly cut grass. It was the best smell in the world. I looked up at the deep blue sky. The clouds drifted by, soft as cotton candy. That morning, so full of rage and violence, felt like a lifetime ago. But it was also seared into every fiber of my being. It reminds me what my duty as a father is. To protect my child, I could be a gentle craftsman, or I could be a warrior with a blade in my hand. I would pay any price, because she is my whole world.